Oh, hi everybody. I hope you're all there doing well. Just letting my dog through. I'm back. Sorry. Do not ignore that man behind the curtain. Ignore that person behind the curtain. So today's live stream. I've been thinking about, the lies that we tell ourselves are the most insidious. And it's crazy. We know that politicians lie. The joke is that, don't trust lawyers, that anybody who's in charge at work is probably not telling the truth. So we as humans, we understand that people are going to lie to us. And yet, I mean, we still get upset. We don't want to be lied to, but it's kind of like we expect it. It's like we understand that there will be those who lie. And yet, as much as we don't want that, and there's been, of course, I think everywhere in the world, yes, there's been a whole new approach to protecting people's data, privacy acts, and being able to access, for example, our medical records, or any of our personal histories, that sort of thing, right? And yet I feel myself that the most damaging lies that I've ever heard are the ones I've told myself. And yes, it's hard, because when we are telling ourselves these things, it's really difficult to stop and see that it's a lie. I spent my life bulimic. Why? Because I told myself I lie. I believed that if I wanted to find friendships and happiness and peace and joy, I had to be a certain size. I was not obese. I wasn't even really overweight. I was average. I didn't have any muscle tone, and I had a lot of bloating and inflammation even then, even in my teens, which I didn't know I did, but I did, based on the inflammatory foods I used to eat. But I wasn't fat, and yet I thought I had to look like all the models on the magazine covers. I thought if I was going to be happy and content, I had to, have a boyfriend in high school, or, I had to make sure I wore contacts and not glasses, because I would look like a dork in my glasses. I don't wear contacts because, quite frankly, they're uncomfortable. I get very dry eyes, and I honestly prefer glasses. That's me at this point. The only time it's a bit of a challenge is if we're on holiday and we're either at a lake where there's a beach, or we're possibly at a pool, then I don't go swimming with my glasses on. Or if I walk into the water, I don't put my head under, because glasses get wet. But beyond that, and that's not a deal breaker. But beyond that, there's so many lies that I found I told myself. Okay, I told myself I could not wear skinny jeans. I could not wear flares because they wouldn't look right. No, I couldn't possibly be a size 10 UK, which is a 6 in the US and Canada. I couldn't. No, that's not me. I'm not that size. I'm still a 22. I must be. I can't wear those cute outfits because I'm almost 50. Well, I'm 50 in this case, because I'm too old, or oh, whether only if you're 20. I shouldn't be wearing cycling shorts with a t-shirt, because that's what the 20-year-olds are wearing. Why not? Says who? Right? I'm healthy. I'm thinner. I'm fit. I've lost lots of fat, and so why not? But those are the lies I used to tell myself. I used to be convinced I had to cover my face with makeup. That if I had any shine on my face, then maybe this is just me as a woman, that something was wrong. Now I don't wear makeup, or hardly ever. One, it lets my skin breathe, but two, I don't need that. I don't need to hide anything, because I found a way of eating that is helping my skin to get healthier, to be a lot less dry and itchy than it would normally be. My hair has waves in it, which 1964. Hi there. Glad to see you. I'm waving. I can't see you back, but I'm glad you're here. It's so crazy the lies that we can tell ourselves. When I first hurt my back 9 years ago, my thoughts were never, oh, let me try this because it might help. Let me try this because maybe it'll help me get better. I just thought I will never get better. I will never get rid of my chronic and acute pain. I will never get rid of inflammation. I will always have fibromyalgia. I will always have brain fog. I will always be depressed. I will always have severe anxiety, where I would be have almost panic attacks in social situations because that's what I thought. That was where I was stuck in my life at that time. Now, truth be told, I was not walking strong in my relationship with God, and that is definitely a key component on being able to look and see that what I was telling myself, what I was repeating in my head was not the truth. That for me was key. Regardless of being able to eat healthy and get healthy, by being carnivorous and getting rid of all the crap that I was eating, all the seed oils and the processed, wheat and breads and cereals, all the things that I knew I could not tolerate anyways, all the gluten and gluten filled products. So all the brownies and caramel slices and cookies and everything else, I knew they were bad for me. I knew they were inflammatory for my arthritis. I knew that. But I figured, you know what? I can't work anymore. I can't drive anymore. I feel like I'm useless as a wife. I feel like I am useless as a mother. Um, I'm going to do this because it'll make me feel better. And the problem is, for me, maybe for you guys, but for me, I figured, screw it, it's worth it. I'm going to eat this crappy food. I know it's crappy, but it tastes great. And it did. But within half an hour, inflamed. By the way, well, they're compression gloves. So some people use them for arthritis. I use that if my wrist gets sore, not so much inflamed, but because I like to write in my journal, write my thoughts down if I'm reading a favorite passage of scripture or something just comes to mind. If I have an idea of what I want to talk about, I'll write that down. And so it's not so much for the arthritis, but it does help keep the blood flowing effectively so that my Raynaud's doesn't act up all the time. Um, but I thought I will never get over my IBS symptoms. I thought I would be constipated for life. And it didn't matter. I was taking the maximum dosage available of Senna tablets, like prescribed to me. And even then, I was lucky if I had a bowel movement once every 2 to 3 weeks, which is not normal. The thing they tell you to do with IBS is eat more soluble fiber. The thing is, that made it worse. And you can check out videos by Dr. Ken Berry. You can go to Professor Bart Kay, Professor Ben Bickman, Dr. Anthony Chafee, Dr. Sarah Zaldivar, Dr. Kiltz. And what they will say to you is that, and it is confirmed that there is no requirement in the human body for fiber. It's not required. It really isn't. And how the guy who thought it was a factor, it was sort of a misleading study, well, observation at best, right? It is not required. Since I have been carnivorous in my eating, since I've been eating animals, muscle meats, egg yolks, salt, bacon, yes to sausages sometimes, absolutely. I love donor meat, which is usually lamb, but sometimes it's a mix of like lamb, mutton, and a bit of chicken, all roasted and cooked, however they do it together. It's delicious. Just the meat. It's nice and fatty because it's mostly lamb or mutton, so it's really amazing, high in protein, super filling. I'm craving it just now. But there are those lies that we are told that we accept because we don't know any different. For example, we were lied to for decades, and we were told that saturated fat caused heart disease. There is no evidence of any kind anywhere in any study that proves this in any way. There's not even an association of heart disease with saturated fats. Because the people that were observed, many of them were smokers, they were eating high levels of plants and carbohydrates, and that was the issue. And as it turns out, I think it was in 2015, the American Heart Association released a paper which actually said that when the first study was done, I think it was in the 70s or 80s, the three Harvard doctors who were heading the study up were paid off by big sugar companies to lie and say that sugar was not the cause of heart disease or associated with it. It was saturated fat that was the problem. Now, they haven't actually gone back and put out a brand new paper. So it's not like they've updated their website, but they've made the update quietly in the background. Unfortunately, um, the other countries who follow the American food pyramid, because I think the States did it first, and very soon after, or around the same time, Canada put out theirs. The UK has one, and of course, also most every country throughout Europe and the Middle East and Africa, they have some sort of guide as to what they consider to be um, a balanced diet. With I think it's up to 66% of what you eat is supposed to be plant based, and any protein you get should be from some fish, some white meats, and virtually almost no red meat whatsoever, which I did for decades when I was eating, when I wasn't binging and purging and restricting and, going through the mania of eating disorder and disordered eating. When I was eating, that's the stuff I was eating. And I didn't know what, and I wouldn't have anyways, because you think, well, your doctor's telling you eat this way, and you want to trust the doctor, right? You think you, and I don't know that they were out with a nefarious purpose and intentionally trying to cause harm. It's just from what I've heard from these actual MDs who are also carnivore in their approach to eating, or eating a ancestrally appropriate diet, which is maybe 90% animals, and perhaps will include some things like maybe some berries in season, um, some poultry, some pork, but most of what they eat is from large ruminant animals, the muscle meats. Okay. And even they have said that doctors, when they train, have either zero training in nutrition or perhaps a rotation, like maybe 2 months, once a week, very little time spent learning about nutrition. And so of course they're not going to know this stuff unless you've gone in as somebody like Professor Bart Kay, or you've gone into something like Professor Ben Bickman, where they look at things at a cellular level. Then you're not going to know. So I don't believe that the doctors that I've had in my past are intentionally trying to cause me harm. It's just change takes a long time, unfortunately. Change takes a long time. I realize that eliminating absolutely everything else except for me, beef, egg yolks, bacon, and then sometimes some lamb or some sausage on the side, maybe brisket and steak once in a while. Outside of that, I realized everything else had to go because that's how sensitive my gut was with IBS and leaky gut. So when I realized the truth, I was at first angry. I felt like I've been deceived, I've been lied to, and yes, but not intentionally. I was all ready to go, print off all my information and take it to my GP and say, look at this. And what are they going to do? that they don't know what to do with it. It took them almost 4 years before they were finally willing to accept that I had an underactive thyroid. And in spite of seeing my T4 levels so low that they weren't even on the range, on the acceptable range of what they deemed normal. So, and that's something that they actually test for regularly. I guess they say, especially for women when we enter perimenopause. So it took them a while to even accept that. And I realized they're not trying to cause harm, but it is, even here, like, so Canada and the UK are the same in that our healthcare is free, which is fantastic. So my pain medications, anything I take, um, the gabapentin I take for my to help with my fibromyalgia pain, it's a nerve blocking medication, so it works on the brain. I also take sertraline, which helps manage my depression, along with eating a proper diet, along with having a relationship with God, being a Christian. You know, when I turn back to the scriptures and I read through and remember how much God has blessed me and loves me, it's a lot easier for me to pick out when I'm listening to lies I'm telling myself, and when maybe it's something I need to think about. You know, I used to constantly have in my mind this loop that was like, you're never going to be good enough, you're never going to find anybody, you're fat, you're disgusting, you're hideous, no one's going to love you, you need to lose more weight. And that would be triggered by my social anxiety, feeling like I would never quite fit in. I don't know why that happened. My parents were supportive and loving. My younger brother and sister were never issues. There were never problems. You know, they were closer to each other because they're only 15 months apart. And so they were just a grade apart in school. And oh, hello there, Paolo. Thank you for joining in. So, you know, so they always had the same group of friends. And I don't know what it is. There are some of us, we seem, it's like we're almost more susceptible to telling ourselves negative things and believing it. And, you know, I know for a fact that, especially if you are someone who's coming out of an eating disorder or even just disordered eating, you know, there are some people who maybe they wouldn't consider themselves to have been anorexic or bulimic, but maybe they had something where they could only eat chicken a certain way, or they couldn't eat after 6 o'clock because they were trying to have a certain time window and it had to be exactly the same every day, or they could only eat 3 eggs maximum, or they were only going to eat like not lean cuisine, but like special diet Weight Watchers food for a month because then hopefully that would help them lose weight for an event. But they wouldn't necessarily consider themselves to have a full blown eating disorder, but they did have definitely an unhealthy relationship with food. And I think if we're honest, in a lot of ways, I think we all do to some degree, whether it's, you know, you don't have your favorite snack for a while and then you're like, oh, I got to have this. And you eat, like, say, an entire bag of Doritos, right? And then you leave it as a bag and that's fine and you move on, as opposed to a binge eater who has to go out and binge on junk food constantly. So I would binge more on things like that I thought were healthy at the time, things like pasta or leftover salad or, you know, that type of stuff, because even growing up, we didn't my parents did not keep junk food in the house. We had a lot of things like Raisin Bran or cornflakes or Rice Krispies, you know, like non-sweetened cereals. But they also kept brown sugar in the house. So we would just put spoonfuls of brown sugar on like shredded wheat, Raisin Bran, and that might be a treat after school. I would literally go in and grab handfuls out of the box, pick out the raisins, and put all the flakes back. Yeah. So, mom, if you ever watch this, sorry, in case you wondered, that was me who would. We used to call it tunneling. You dig out the good stuff and you put all the rest of it back. So I would do that. But I was so convinced that life would somehow reach this magical level of perfection if I could just be thin enough. And honestly, when I was in my teens, I'm about 120 pounds, which I think it works out to about 54 kilos, 53, 54, something like that. I'm 5'5". So for me, that's healthy. That's where my weight is settled for the last year and a half. So I'm pretty sure that's where I'm meant to stay, which is great. And I was never that size through high school. I was easily a good 15 to 20 pounds above that. Now, I know that a lot of that was water weight because of all the carbs I was eating as well. Yeah, there was some extra fat, but I didn't exercise. I hated exercise, so I didn't have any muscle definition. I was just trying to constantly binge and purge or restrict. And for some reason, people would say, "Oh, you have such a nice shape. You have such nice curves." I didn't hear it. I didn't believe it. Didn't matter who said it. I didn't believe it. In my mind, I had to be stick thin. Most of my friends were thinner. And I felt like somehow, sorry, I'm talking with my hands. If I could just reach some magical number on the scale, life would be perfect. I'd have no problems. Everything would be fine. And of course, that's not true. I wasn't a Christian at the time, for one thing. And I wasn't trusting in anything greater than myself. I was trying to do it my way. And I didn't even I knew my idea of God at the time was, yeah, I'm sure he exists, but I think he just lets us do whatever we feel like. And we just try to be good people. That was my understanding. I didn't have a personal relationship with God. I certainly wasn't, walking with Jesus every day. And it was obvious. My emotions were completely all over the place. I had massive mood swings. My PMS was horrific. Um, and my actual cycles themselves were horribly painful. They were awful. And they stayed that way well after my kids were both born. They say, for women that often improves after you've had children. Didn't for me. No, not at all. And in fact, before I went carnivore in 2020, that was still the case. I was so bloated and so inflamed, and I just believed it will never change. That's it. God's punishing me somehow, and this is life. I will never have feel purpose again. I will never get my brain back. I'm just lost in a fog, and I don't want to be involved in life. And my kids, well, I hope they do okay. They're teens now. I guess my job is done. I don't have to check in anymore. And I believed it because I'd given up. And I think that's even worse than, there are some people out there in the space who are, claiming things like eat loads and loads of sugar and honey and carbs and you'll still be fine. Seriously. And that's not true because right up until then, I was eating a lot of toast with peanut butter and honey, with just toast with butter and honey on my oatmeal, honey in my coffee. And I'm not saying it was just the honey. I was also eating easily seven seven helpings of fruit a day, plus things like carrots and potatoes at dinner, with a little bit of lean protein. I was completely eating the opposite way of how I should have been for my ultimate health, and my inflammation and bloating was simply beyond belief. It was ridiculous. It was so frustrating, and I couldn't lose weight. I kept gaining weight. Now, part of that was because I have hypothyroidism. And even when the specialist put me on thyroid medication, which was in March of 2020, my weight went up. I didn't eat more. I didn't eat anything different than what I was eating at that point. My weight went up significantly. When I saw her in March, I was about I think it was about 165, maybe 170 pounds. And by the time we got out of the first lockdown here in England, which would have been the end of May, right? So between March and May, 2 months, and I was just over 200 pounds. That's like over 30 pounds of weight. Now, I know a lot of it was water weight because carbohydrates, they're carbons that will hang on to hydration in the body. So they hang on to water weight. Okay. And when I cut those out, wow, just it started to just drop. And I could tell I was starting to lose fat a couple of months into eating a ketogenic and then a carnivore way. So I started keto, but I really ate virtually no vegetables. So I was essentially carnivore from the beginning. I tried paleo for 2 weeks with my husband. It was a complete disaster. Um, Dark leafy greens and veggie smoothies and um, nuts and seeds. Blah. I gave it a try because I trusted this woman who recommended eating like this for reversing Hashimoto's. And my sister-in-law used this book, and she lost 30 pounds and she reversed her symptoms. So I thought, I'll give it a try. Me, I put on 15 pounds. So it was really upsetting. And at that point, I was kind of feeling like, that's it. I'm just going to keep getting fatter. I'm going to have to take more and more medication. Um, my pain will never get better. Just take me to Amsterdam and let me live there so I can, get some marijuana legally and, take that. CBD oil, no, forget it. I knew it probably wasn't going to do anything. And of course, it was easier to get to Amsterdam than to fly back to Canada, where marijuana is legal through the whole country. Now, obviously, we didn't do that. I knew that that was impractical. And ultimately, I was on enough prescription medications. I really didn't want to take anything else. I really didn't want to. I felt like a zombie all the time. And I wanted to cry all the time. I couldn't fall asleep very easily. And then when I did, I didn't sleep very well through the night. And so I woke up tired and in pain and inflamed, and the cycle repeats. And I never thought I would ever be able to see improvement. And you know what though? It's amazing because once I started losing the weight I share this because the weight as well as the fat, my joints almost felt brand new by comparison. Because when you take off 80 extra pounds combined of fat and water, that's going to take so much pressure off your joints. It doesn't mean they're not sore. I'm sitting here right now and my knees ache and my lower back aches. And it probably always will. But I can get around the house without crutches. And I never thought that would be possible. I never thought it would be possible, ever. And yet I can, and I do. And I thought I was going to need to have a care person come in every morning to help me shower and wash my hair and get dressed because I did for almost a year. That is how much pain and inflammation I had through my body between the arthritis and the fibromyalgia and then just overall chronic lower back pain. It hurt to hold a hairbrush. It hurt to lift my hands up and wash my hair every day. I couldn't do it. Now I still have a shower chair that I use because I really can't stand for very long because it does start to really cause my lower back strain. But that's okay. I don't need to. I sit and I can do it myself. And I haven't needed anybody since just before COVID. I never thought I could do it. I never thought it would happen. I actually never even believed that keto could possibly help or work. I didn't believe it, but I figured out what the heck. I've tried everything else. I'm just getting fatter and sicker and more inflamed and having more pain. So why not? And it did work. It worked. And like I say, I needed something even a little bit more, to I'll have a cappuccino, but otherwise I drink my coffee black if I drink it. I don't usually eat the whole egg. The white, I'm okay. I'm a bit better with the whites than I used to be, but I keep it to a minimum. It's typically just the egg yolk. And as far as beef goes, it's got to be at least 20% fat. That that's what hits my satiety spot. Like, you know. But I learned that through trial and error. I don't eat chicken. If you like chicken, hey, awesome, go for it. But I find that I get a bit of a histamine reaction if I eat a lot of chicken or if I eat pork, as far as anything other than maybe bacon and sometimes a sausage. But I get super flushed. I did have a sausage for lunch today. I get really flushed. My rosacea gets really prominent and it's almost like eczema when it gets really bad. And that only happens if I've eaten chicken, pork. Plus, I find with chicken, it's so lean. I have to eat a lot to feel full, and even then, I'm still hungry. You know what I mean? Like it's like you get stuffed, but you could eat again within an hour. Kind of like when you eat like Chinese takeaway. I don't even bother. Not that I do it now, and not that I've done it at all in the last couple of years. But when we used to get it, I would eat it, and that whole thing of an hour later. Yeah, what else is there to eat? It's not filling for me, and so that's why I don't eat poultry. My go-to is fatty ground beef, always. Now, I'd asked if our butcher could do 20% or even a bit higher, and he said that he can't. He cannot guarantee it higher than 10% because of how they butcher up the cows Monday, Tuesday. They make their steak mince after everything else is done, and so you any of the fat they might have used is part of like their steaks that they cut. So all they're left with is leaner meats. So that's great. It's perfect for my husband and son. I just don't eat that. I get my mince from just a regular supermarket. And it's fine. It's still pasture raised. There are different standards here in the UK than what you would get in the States. So I'm not worried about feedlot beef or anything like that. Having said that, though, um, because the cow is a ruminant animal, it has multiple stomachs. So even if it's eating corn or cereals or even pulses, I mean, I don't know why you'd feed it that, but if it decided to eat that, it has the ability to fully break down all of the fibers and convert it into um, what its body needs to build skeletal muscle meat as well as adding fat in. So it's not an issue, whereas pigs and poultry have one stomach like us. And so whatever they eat, whatever grains they eat, it's not fully converted over. Does that make sense? It can't, they cannot fully digest things like corn, cereals, grains. So some of that does end up in the tissue. And I'm sensitive to those things, which is, I think, probably why I react to chicken. Chicken wings always sound great, but I find they're not that filling. There's not a whole lot of meat there, and I tend to get really bad rosacea if I eat too much. So I just don't. But there were even when I lost the first 20-25 pounds, which happened in less than 2 months, I could see it. Like I knew it had happened, but there was this disbelief. I was like, "Oh my goodness, no, I didn't. I couldn't have lost weight like that. No, I didn't. Of course not. Surely I didn't lose that weight." And in my head, I would look at in the mirror and go, "Yeah, but you still have a belly. You're still bulgy. You still have, you still need to lose weight off your thighs. You're not that thin. You haven't really lost a whole lot of weight. No, you're still fat." The brain is always slow to catch up to what the body's done. with those things. And I was terrified. I was terrified that the weight was just I would wake up one morning and all the weight was back. And so I was under eating. I was definitely, I wasn't trying to intermittent fast. Well, I was, but I wasn't. I was trying to see how long I could push out my first meal of the day. And I was drinking too much coffee in order to do that. I was drinking 3 or 4 cups because caffeine suppresses the appetite, which is why it is recommended if you are going to choose to drink coffee, you should probably eat first, unless it's decaf, and then have coffee after, because then at least your satiety signals are not being interfered with by the caffeine. And I had to learn that the hard way. The first few months, especially, I wasn't doing that. And you know, I I kept hearing those lies in my head. Oh, you have to lose even more weight. You're not worthy yet. You haven't lost quite enough. You still have fat on you. You're not done. You're not doing it right. You should be losing more and you got to do it faster. So eat less. And I was falling back. It took me a little while, but I realized end of September that I was believing those lies that I used to tell myself when I was in my bulimic phase. And even just during my binging and restricting phases. Oh, you're horrible. You've displeased God because you ate. You're going to be punished. You're going to get fat again. You're going to put on fat. You're going to get bloated and you will never find healing. Now, I didn't share any of this. This was all in my head. And my face on the outside looked pleasant and probably happy. But in my mind, I was wrestling with this. And it was like an aha God moment, because right then, thereabouts, I realized, wow, I've been thinking about having more time, connecting to God, praying more, reading the Bible more, finding a faith community online, because of course the whole world was in lockdown. And I realized I don't want to just do that. I don't want to just listen into a service on a Sunday. I've got to get my walk with God right, because I can't do this. I I cannot fight against these lies by myself and on my own strength. I thought I could. And then it was so crazy, right? The things we suddenly realize that are obvious to everybody else except for us was, um, yeah, I can't do this by myself. And the only way I'm going to ever um, learn how to fight against these lies is if I get back my relationship with God. And I realized that as I had been bulimic for 35 years on it, like in different cycles and stages, but for about 35 years at that point, I realized, you know what? I've never actually had recovery. I've acted like I was okay. I've tried to hide my anxiety, although everyone else could see I was a complete basket case if things didn't go according to my mental checklist, which only I had and didn't share with anybody. As my husband said, I would get freaked out over a to-do list that I had that I hadn't even given him, but I expected him to follow. Yeah, because that's logical sense, right? Um, but I realized if I actually want to have real and true health and healing, and if I want to be able to stop listening to those dark lies, and I don't know if it's because I told myself them, if it was, Satan whispering and I believed it and I repeated it to myself, I don't know. Maybe both. But that's when I realized, wait a second. Now's the chance to actually heal, not just physically. I saw a number of people on YouTube who would talk about whether it was keto or even carnivore, that the goal should be health, not weight loss. And when I first started, in my head, it was like, oh, well, screw the health thing. I'm never going to get better that way, but let me lose some weight and let me lose some fat so I can look awesome. And probably about 6 weeks in, when I noticed my brain fog was lessening, I thought, wait a minute, this improving my overall health, that's a really good reason because I did a lot of things in my life for weight loss. A lot of things. I was vegetarian for, okay, I would like to say a full year, but the reality is about 8 months in, I couldn't deal with it anymore. So when I was out, I would absolutely eat a BLT sandwich. Yeah, sure, there was lettuce and tomato, and I may or may not have mentioned I had bacon as well, right? Um, or it could be something like we would order pizza and my husband would want vegetarian on our side. And the kids would have their pieces with ham and bacon and whatever. And of course, oh yeah, just a bit of the ham fell onto a vegetarian piece, so I had to eat it, of course. Let's just say it was an experiment that thankfully failed. And once I started incorporating meat back in, even a small amount, I felt a big difference. Okay. But it never lasted as far as weight loss. Because what I didn't realize through all that until later was if you restrict enough for long enough, yes, you will lose some weight, but your metabolism will adjust. God made us in a really great way. So during times of famine, we would not starve to death, right? It would hang on to whatever body fat it could, and that's what it would use for energy. And so it took me years of trial and error and ups and downs and anxiety and depression of going, this isn't working, and waiting for the next big pill or the next big shake or whatever superfood that would help you lose weight immediately. That's what I was looking for. So I realized eating the way a carnivore would eat, the way God intended, I couldn't be doing it just to lose fat and weight because it for me it would not be sustainable. I'd already lost just over 20 pounds and I was already a mental basket case, worried that if I had a bit of cheese, oh, I'm gonna get it'll I'll go into a carb blitz bonanza and I'll be right back where I started. And that's when I realized, you know what? My mind is clear. Maybe I need to take this as my opportunity to turn and say, God, I don't know what I'm doing. Please help me. And I think I pretty much said that exactly. God, I don't know what I'm doing. Um, I am becoming bulimic again. I want to be in recovery. I do not want to go backwards. It's a dark, awful place. And I want to have health and healing, but not just physically. I knew I needed mental healing, of course. Everybody did at that point. And more importantly, I needed to heal spiritually. I needed to let God be brighter in my life. I've sort of referred to it as I think of it as like a flame. There's I don't know if you guys will remember this or not. There's a movie that came out, I think it was in 1993 or maybe 1994 called The Prince of Egypt. It's animated story of Moses and how he became the leader that he was. And the title song or the main song on the soundtrack was "If You When You Believe," and it was a duet by Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston. Beautiful song, and it was Hans Zimmer and I can't remember the other guy who wrote the lyrics and the score, but I love it. It's one of my favorite songs, and I've heard a really amazing cover done of it by a choir from one of our sister churches in the Philippines. And one of the lines is, though hope is frail, it's hard to kill. And it struck me because that's how I felt. My hope was very frail. It was beaten, it was bruised, but it was not broken and destroyed. And I just remember thinking to myself at one point, oh, that's it. Like, I mean, yeah, I believe in God and I know God's working, but that's all I can give right now. And you know what? He's not really listening to me anymore. And I believed it enough for so many years that that's why I stayed, probably partly why I was bulimic and anxious and depressed for so long. Um, yes, I was very slow to see a doctor and ask for help because then there's a huge waiting time. But also, I just figured, well, what are they going to do? They're going to give me some pills that may help, may not. Now, some amazing things happened, and it was God doing it. You know, I'd been taking gabapentin and also codeine with extra strength painkillers. So paracetamol, we call it over here. It's equivalent to Tylenol. So it's like Tylenol threes with codeine. So I've been taking those and gabapentin since 2014 when my back was injured. And I've been taking sertraline since 2015 when I finally was had the courage to go to my GP and say, "Look, I'm stressed out. I have one child with special needs. I have another child who is constantly having troubles at school, and I'm trying to work full time, and I need something. I can't deal with this. My mood is everywhere. Please help me." And he said, "Right, let's." I tried. They put me on something else first, and it did nothing. So he put me on sertraline, and he upped me to the to 200 milligrams a day. And I have no shame in sharing that at all. So let me just say this: you can be a Christian and still require medication. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. Just because, see, I prayed for healing, and that came in the form of medication as dispensed by a certified professional. Okay. Now, the sertraline takes a little while to start working. All right. And I felt a huge improvement as far as my depression was concerned overall. Um, However, my anxiety, it had no effect on my anxiety. Now, it's also supposed to help with fibromyalgia because, again, it's an SSRI, so it works on your central nervous system. It's supposed to help calm the signals that tell your parts of your body that you have pain, even if you have no injuries. Panic attack thing? Yes, absolutely. Yep, I used to have that for sure. Um, I felt as though I was always going to make the wrong decision, or I wouldn't know what to say with new people. If my husband said, "Hey, do you want to spend time with certain friends?" Yeah, okay. All right. Well, you call and set it up, and my heart would be like, "Badoom, badoom, 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 badoom." I'm like, "What do you mean me?" Well, you know them better. You set it up. I don't know where should we go. I don't know. You decide. And maybe it wouldn't be as obvious on the outside, but on the inside, I would be having a complete panic attack. I would feel like I was locked in place. And if I'd been standing, say, in the lounge and we were talking, I would be like, yeah, okay, I guess I can call them. So what do you want to do? What time, what day? And I'll just pass it along. I was petrified of making the wrong decision. And not because of how he was at all. And it was nothing with him at all. But that's where my brain was at. And for me at that time, again, super inflamed and the brain fog, not recalling things, having to stop working, no longer able to drive because the medications affected me so much, and feeling like, well, what am I going to do now? I can't work. I feel like I'm just a burden. And those are lies in my head that I replayed constantly. And on days that I felt a bit less pain, and 1964, you probably can relate to this one if you're still there. On the days where I felt okay, I would overdo it. I would be like, okay, let me try to do the laundry and tidy up a little bit and sort the room and organize things, only to be feeling the next day even worse, even worse. So, rebound pain, because I was convinced that I had to do these things. No one asked me to, by the way. It wasn't like I was asked to do these things. Nobody asked me to. I felt like I had to do this because I didn't look sick on the outside. Even though I was on crutches, even though I used to have a perching stool in the kitchen because I couldn't stand long enough to cook dinner, I would still push through and do it because I thought I have to. That's all I'm good for now. That was my insecurity. Those are the lies that I told myself that I believed. Now, again, was Satan whispering those lies in my ear that I believed and repeated to myself? Probably, most likely. It- that's probably where they came from. But that's why those are such deep, insidious lies because we tell them to ourselves, and it's hard to stop them. But for me, the biggest thing that two things that helped, not four, two things that helped. One, I had to get rid of the inflammation and the brain fog in my mind. Yep, me too. I would be just a wreck for the next few days, doing next to nothing. Like I say, I had to have someone come in and help me wash my hair and get dressed every day. And that doesn't require a whole lot of energy. So yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. I get that. And I just was feeling I would feel guilty all the time because I couldn't do any housework. I couldn't do a lot of the cooking. And nobody said I had to, but I just felt like for whatever reason I felt like that's what I have to do. So the lies in our brains, right? They just keep going and going. And so when I cut out all the stuff that was leading to my inflammation and pain, I got my brain back. And that was a big step because I could go look at my life and say, oh, wait a minute, hang on. No one asked me to do these things. That's just me deciding. Well, I don't have to do these things. Or if if I ask for help and my husband or one of my sons would say, yeah, sure, mom, we'll do this for you, then I need to trust they'll get it done and not worry about it. But as long as I was living in that giant brain fog, um, I couldn't do that. Once I was able to get rid of the brain fog, well, then it was a lot easier, to trust that other people could help me and do the things that needed doing. And again, it's not like they asked me to do it in the first place. They knew that I wasn't supposed to because I was at high risk of re-injuring my spine, and I'm still not supposed to do certain things. No heavy lifting of any kind, no constant repetitive bending movements of any kind. Fair enough, fine. I know what not to do, and so did they. So once I got rid of the fog, I was able to go, wait a sec. First, the pain's getting a bit better, and the inflammation has gone down massively, which is amazing. I never thought that would happen. Maybe, maybe I don't have to do it all by myself. Aha, which again should have been something I realized, but when you're lost in brain fog and you are lost in your own doubts and negativity, it's hard to see that. And once the fog began to lift, I could see that, wait a minute, no, some of this is not true. Some of the things I'm telling myself are not true. Yes, I have actually lost weight and lost fat, and my joints don't hurt as much. Wow, I don't need a crutch to walk around the house anymore. That's even better. Um, Amazing. And I have more energy and I'm sleeping better. And I can actually get my brain back and I'm able to focus and I'm able to think through life. And so that was key, right? Was clearing the fog, clearing out the fat, the extra fat that I didn't need on my body. But also as important, and probably even more important, was finding my way back to prayer and meditation and walking with God. Because that's when I realized, wait a second, some of these things are lies, and I don't need to believe them. I just need to remember that I'm forgiven, and I have his grace, and he is looking after me, and it allowed me with a clear mind now to realize that there have been improvements, and in fact, he's with me, and he wants me to have recovery. And when I was able to start connecting with God again, it was amazing. It was like I've said before, it was like going from having a very weak flame of faith to one that is burning like the flame and the pilot light of a boiler or a furnace that will not go out unless the fuel is cut, the fuel line is cut. In other words, it's there until my life ends, whenever that is. Um, and it's been amazing. But I still find there are times where those lies pop into my head, like, "Oh, well, you're still not that thin. You should probably still lose a bit more fat, or you could be doing more. You could be learning how to strength train." And I'm realizing, what does that matter? I'm 50. I'll be 51 in August. I'm finally at a healthy weight. My body fat is around, I think, about 20%, which is actually really good for a woman of my age, and considering that I am physically limited in many ways still. I do not need crutches, but that doesn't mean I can walk a long distance, because then it really does start to bother my lower back. But there have been so many good things that have come out of all this. Makes it easier to go, wait a second, no, 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 that's insecurity, that's lies. You know, that I've reached recovery in my bulimia and in my eating disorder. And I don't look at processed stuff and go, oh, I wish I could eat that. I'm able to look at it and go, I could eat that. I have the freedom to eat it if I choose. But I know within 10 minutes, I will feel like my wrists and my feet have swollen up along with my knees. And it's not worth it. It's inflammatory. I'm going to get bloated. I'm going to hold on to water weight. I'm going to feel like I'm 7 months pregnant again and feel nauseous. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. So I eat the things I crave. And anything else, whatever. It's noise in the background. It's not important. And for me, what's helped me to be able to stop and think about the thoughts in my head and go, that's not true. That's a lie, is because I've been able to reconnect with God. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I had not been able, if I hadn't been able to heal and reduce my brain fog, to get my brain back. So I don't know. It's for me. It's amazing. It's two things, right? It's got to be eating the way God intended, which is the animals that He put on this earth, egg yolks in my case as well, a little bit of dairy in my coffee, and that's it. And for other people, it might be strictly ruminant animals, water, and salt. For some people, it might be, oh, and butter, because butter has almost no lactose in it, which is awesome. So it might be adding butter, having seafood and poultry and beef and lamb and pork, whatever you can get, right? Whatever works. But it's helped me to realize that the lies I would hear or think or repeat to myself are just lies. I am much healthier. And it's amazing because I was convinced that I was going to be in chronic pain and, stuck in my own little world forever. If you had told me 2.5 years ago that I would even be doing this, I would say, and talk about what? Fibromyalgia sucks. I'm in pain and it hurts, and I hope nobody else has it. And if you do, I'm really sorry and I'm with you. That was my mindset. I was defeatist. I was convinced that it could not improve at all. And I'm glad I was wrong. And it was absolutely had to start with the nutrition and what I ate. But that also led me to realizing, once I got my head and my brain back, I need to be walking with God, because that's the key for me. I got the food part right. That's the simple part. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's the simple part. And if you aren't a Christian, or whether that means you just believe in something, a higher power of some sort, whether that's nature or perhaps a god of a different religion, whatever it is, if it helps you to see that there is something greater than us that made this world. I mean, clearly, just think about this, all the different blades of grass throughout the world for all time so far, all the different leaves and all the different bushes and trees and vegetables and plants and flowers. Mind boggling. Something made that. It didn't just happen, right? So, whatever you choose to believe, whether that's nature, um, whatever, I think the important thing is understanding that something is out there greater than us. And there are a lot of people that, have a lot of credentials and who are trustworthy um, on YouTube when it comes to nutrition. And I would again say my favorite go to person is Professor Bart Kay. He is absolutely qualified to speak about the cellular level of what happens through metabolism when you eat certain foods, which foods are best for us, etc. I also would highly recommend Professor Ben Bickman. I would also recommend people checking out the videos of Dr. Ken Berry and a lot of their guests. I think also Dr. Michael Eads, who's a physical anthropologist, who is a doctor, but also has a background in physical anthropology. I believe that's correct. These guys are certified and trained and qualified to speak in depth about this subject. Okay. I'm not, I just know that it's worked for me. Okay. I dropped 80 pounds within 6 months. I've never lost that amount of weight ever in my entire life, ever. No, not at all. And it wasn't just water weight. There was fat as well, but I mean, water's what we have most. Um, but, and so that for me made me happy because I wasn't feeling fat and bloated. Of course it did. I'm not going to lie and pretend like be all altruistic and say, oh, well, it was a lovely benefit. No, it was initially the reason why I went keto and then carnivore because I was obese. I was carrying far too much fat and water weight on my body. I needed to get rid of some of it. It was unhealthy. It was causing me a great deal of pain, inflammation, and swelling. And so I was extremely happy to to see the first 20 pounds. Imagine my shock when another 20 pounds came off. You know, fast forward a few months, and by the end of it, I was down 80 pounds. Wow, without ever exercising. I did a few yoga stretches here and there, and that was more just to help ease my lower back pains during my monthly cycles. But that was it. That was it. And it has worked. And then there are a lot of people who have very similar stories. If you like to work out because you enjoy the endorphins and the exercise, like my husband loves cycling, fantastic. Do it. Enjoy it. You betcha. I don't because I can't. I am still limited by the fact of my lower back disc injury. I still have an inflamed and irritated sacroiliac joint. And I have been advised that if I'm not careful, I could easily prolapse another disc. So I have to be very, very mindful of what things I do and what things I don't do, right? But I have energy and I have more muscle on my body and I have less fat on my body. And overall, I have a lot less swelling and inflammation and pain. And so that was God showing me that by eating the way He always intended for us to eat, my body could actually start to heal itself to a large extent. Whether it heals more, I don't know. No idea. Maybe it will. Maybe one day I was going to say, you'll see me running somewhere. I hate running. I tried running. No, I'm not going to be running. But maybe you'll find me going on long power walks somewhere or swimming at the local pool. I don't know. No idea. But the fact that there's been even this amount of healing so far proves that me thinking there was no hope was a lie. And the problem is, especially for us with autoimmune conditions and chronic illness, chronic pain, is we, at least for me, okay, when I say we, I mean me. I was so convinced that I was going to always have that amount of inflammation and pain, that nothing was going to work, that any attempt I made to make an improvement, whether it was hydrotherapy or physiotherapy or a cortisol injection, I think part of the problem was because I was so convinced in my mind that I'll do it, but it's not going to help. It didn't help because I was so convinced it wouldn't. You set yourself up in such a way that it's a self fulfilling prophecy, you know. Maybe it wouldn't have worked anyways. I don't know. But this has. And so for me, when I stop and think about how far I've come, it helps me remember that when I feel as though, well, I'm not as far ahead as that person, or well, I'm not lifting weights like her, or I can't strength train like that person. I have to stop and think, okay, but that's them. This is me. And I don't have to be like them. And trying to tell myself that I do and meet some unrealistic expectation, even in what's considered healthy, is a lie. For me, I feel super healthy. Have I reversed everything completely? No. But I feel like for most of my conditions, I'm probably 80% healed. With my bulimia and my food addictions and disordered eating, I would say, well, I'm in recovery. So I would say I'm 90 to 95% healed, meaning there is no cure. And if you were to put down a piece of cake and force me to eat it, I'm going to end up having the same issues, So I would say that those symptoms, though, are for the most part almost fully gone. And whatever's left are the things that I work through when I'm, you know, praying and meditating and spending time with God. That's what helps me. And anybody who perhaps struggles with anxiety or depression, please hear me. I'm not saying that all you got to do is just pray more. That's ridiculous. Okay, I've had someone say that to me, and it was not helpful at all. Um, and we can be Christians and love God and still struggle with anxiety and depression, especially after COVID. And I think it's important that we don't judge people who struggle with these things. It doesn't mean, wow, still, yep. What? Oh, hey, that is amazing. Wow, you're on a walking routine. See, that's fantastic. I'm hoping what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to spend as much time as I possibly can with super straight posture because after my injury, I couldn't straighten up. And it reached the point where this was my posture permanently and I couldn't get any straighter than that. So I'm little by little, trying to work it where I think the better I can improve my posture and strengthen my core that way, then I'm hoping that I'll be able to do a bit more walking. Like I say, I walk around the house, and if I do too much, it does hurt. But that is amazing. That is so amazing that you've got a walking routine. See, that just tells me anything's possible. And I don't know, it's almost as if when we have these issues, at least with me, okay, it sucks and it's awful. But I got so used to the fact that this is just who I was. I wasn't Megan anymore. I was Megan with fibromyalgia, and everyone had to hear about my fibromyalgia. Now I talk about it here because I want to be able to help others and say, hey, look, there's hope. It doesn't have to necessarily be how it is. And you know, I I knew that I'd gotten obese. I was just over 200 pounds, which is more than I weighed with both my pregnancies. Okay, that's fat. that is fat. I'm saying it about myself, so it's okay. But I was convinced that was just me. Poor me. I have an underactive thyroid. Poor me. I'm just gonna keep getting fatter. Um, that's amazing, Dhruv Jane. She prays. And you know what? For me, I pray, but for what I found, so for me, with my anxiety especially, the first thing I had to do was I had to cut all the processed crap out of my diet. Um, Research has shown that processed foods can cause inflammation in the brain that can lead to mood swings, mood disorders, things like depression, anxiety, and so forth. And so that helped massively. I had to get rid of the brain fog in order to pray to God. So it was kind of doing it all together, if you will. And that's great that she prays. I mean, that's part of it, right? The For me it was I did pray in the past. However, I wasn't doing anything about what I was eating. And all I was eating was junk food and processed garbage, which was causing me the inflammation. So even if I prayed for it to go away, I wasn't eating in a way that was going to help with that. Right. So when I cut the stuff out of my diet and I got my brain back and I realized that my inflammation was down, my pain was down enough that I no longer had to walk around my house with a crutch, just massive. I had two at one point, and I don't know how. I think one of my kids borrowed it, and it got broken. So I only had the one crutch. Okay, and to be able to walk through the house without the crutch, yeah, I was still sore, and I still was walking like kind of hunched over, but I was doing it, and so my pain I found was at least manageable. It was so, like I said, it was so bad at the start of this live stream. I said it was so bad at one point. I said to my husband, let's just move to Amsterdam so I can, partake of their legal drugs on top of what I'm taking because my stuff isn't working. And because of how it would react with my gut, they could not give me morphine or anything else. So that didn't happen. Just saying. But I find now that my medication actually is effective. I mean, at least to a certain degree. Um, our bodies are adaptive. God made us that way. We're adaptive. And so after a certain amount of time, you will adapt to whatever is in your system, which is what has happened to me. But I do not want to go to a higher level opioid. I don't want to get into morphine or anything like that. So this has been truly a godsend because it's the way we were intended to eat the whole time, you know, um, and no need for all the plants and stuff. People can eat them if they want them. I'm not saying don't ever touch them. Not saying you can't. I don't have a say in what you guys eat, just like you don't have a say in what I guys eat and what I eat. I'm just saying what's helped me the most has been eating a carnivorous diet. And that's made a huge difference. But, kind of like you can pray, but if you're not eating the right things, it's not going to change. Whereas for me, I started to make the right changes to my diet, but I realized for my own mental health, I needed to get back and start praying to God again and walking with him, trusting in him. And I'm not perfect. Okay. I mean, the only one who was ever perfect was Jesus. That's not me. Spoiler alert. I'm a work in progress, but I find it a lot easier to stop and pray and meditate with a clear mind when things come up that would normally make me anxious. So that is what has been helping me. And it helps me easier. It makes it easier for me to ignore the lies that my brain wants to tell me. And I don't know, maybe it's because I'm getting older, but the lies that used to cripple me when I was young, like, oh, you're never going to find anybody, you're too fat, you're too gross, you got to lose weight, that stuff, I know it's a lie. I wish I knew it then, but I'm glad at least I know it now. Anyways, that's it for me, guys. I can hear the dog behind me needing to go out. So thank you guys so much for jumping in. It's always amazing to talk with you guys. Drivjin, I really hope that your mom does better. I'll keep her in my prayers. But I really hope that she finds some relief. And thank you so much for sharing 19 Stony 64. I'm so glad to hear from you as well. I think we are definitely, in some ways, we are injury twins, if you will. That's it for me, guys. I will see you in the next live stream. Thanks so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your days, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.